Let's get into the second session. Our next speaker is the head of retail for Google Marketing Platform and is going to come on stage and talk about sustainable growth in an unstable time, looking at some innovations that are occurring within Google. So please join me in welcome Abigail Byre to the stage. There we go. The green button.
Brilliant.
Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Byre.
Byre.
It's an unusual one. It actually means cowshed. But I used to be cod before I got married, so I feel like it's a better of an upgrade compared to that. So.
What does Byre mean?
It means cowshed in Old English. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. If you go up to Scotland, apparently there's lots of Byres up there, so you find them there. Well, thank you for having me today. It's super to be here with you all. So I'm going to take you through a few short slides of what we're doing, what we're talking to our customers about, particularly in the retail sector, about how they can really leverage data and technology in this new and stable world that we've been hearing about this morning. So I think it might be a bit of a recap from this morning and hopefully a good segue into this afternoon. So moving on, so this picture, I tried to find a woman waking up. The only one I could find was full of makeup. They all look like they're all so glamorous. Who are these women that go to bed like that? This is definitely not me in the morning. But how many of you wake up and the first thing you do is go to your phone? It's so common. Most of us have it as our alarm clock for starters. But personal admission, I probably spend at least 3 hours a day on my phone. If you look at the stats, it's shocking. Probably unlock it 100 times a day, about 200 notifications. It's crazy. That digital wellbeing app is doing us no favours because it makes you realise how much we use our phones. But this makes you realise how much access we have to information, and it's like never before. But the problem with all this information is we've got too much choice. And this photo is a Gursky picture, and it actually sold. It's the most expensive, I think, I've sold at auction ever. 3.3 million this photo sold for. But what I love about it, it's a 99-cent store, I think in LA, and you can just see the vast array of choice. And that's what our brains have to deal with, this amount of choice in products. And that's without 1.5 billion websites that we also have access to. Pretty crazy, hey? So although we're amazing, we've got all this choice, we get fatigued, we're tired. It's so hard for us to think and make all these choices every day. So we turn to technology, and we've talked about this a lot. You've seen this on a lot of slides already today, whether it's through convenience and speed of being able to pay by your phone or by your watch, or whether it's being able to curate playlists or content, or even think about maybe food that you want to eat. There's technology to help us in all these areas, and we turn to it immediately. This is what we think about retail, right? So retail was all about price, assortment, and convenience, but it was also about curation. You trusted a retailer to be able to source and find all the right brands that they believe would be the right ones for you. But that's moved beyond those times right now. So even though you can still go into John Lewis and find a lovely array of products that they've personally selected, we know that there's more choice out there. And we were going to go across those 1.5 billion websites to find it. I was looking for a kettle the other day. I was not going to be satisfied with the 5 reviews on John Lewis, so I went to Amazon to see what reviews they had, and then to another shop to see what reviews they had. We want reviews. We want our own personal research. It's really important for us to go on that journey. But as I said before, it's tough. We don't have time to do that in our busy lives, to be looking at all that content and all those sites. So I think brands and retailers have got a real role to play in helping us with curating these contents and creating these products and making it easier for us to shop with them. So the next one shows this is about the research, right? So apparently we search for paper towels. Who are these people that search for paper towels? But even our own data shows us that we're searching more and more forever for this research. So near me searches, best doorbells. We want to be empowered with this information so that when we make that choice, it's the right decision. 80%. Any guesses? Any guesses? Well, it's a bit of a trick question because there's 2 answers. So 80% of the adult population, that's anyone over the age of 14 in this survey, actually are buying online. But also, only 80% or only 20% in this sense, but 80% of actual money being transacted is still actually happening in the store. So we've got to that point of access. Everyone's got access. Everyone's using the internet, but we're still not quite there yet in terms of in terms of transactions and our experience with the digital world. So I think, again, this goes back to the role of our brands and our retailers of helping move this along. So at Google, we call this the age of assistance. So what we're thinking about at Google is how we utilize all this wealth of data that we've got access to and how we use machine learning. If we had more time today, we could go into a lot more detail on that, but I was going to briefly touch on it. But it's about how we actually give our customers and our users, we understand them and we give them that curation of content that we talked about earlier, that helping them with the tasks that need to get done, and just make it that easy day-to-day process when they wake up in the morning. For those of you that have got a Google Home or Alexa, we talked about earlier, that helps you on your day-to-day journey. I wake up in the morning, I can ask it what the weather's going to be like, what my tube status is going to be, and it even knows that my journey to work, so it will tell me if there's going to be any delays on my journey. So it's all about predicting intent. And we talk a lot about that as well at Google and with our customers about how can we really help you utilize all the data that you've got access to really predict intent and help get on that front foot with your customers and help them with those difficult decisions that they have to make day to day. And it's about continuously learning. So you don't just run a machine learning model, maybe think about, this is great, I can now know this about my customers, I'm going to serve them this ad. It's about the continuous learning and that process of continuously looking at those models and retraining it and re-looking at your data. It shouldn't be a one-off thing that we do. So what can our brands do and how can they interact with this? So split into 3 areas. So acceleration, so bringing data to the heart of everything we do in your business that we've just talked about. Connecting, so this is being present. So wherever your customers are, whatever channel they're in, and being present in that moment. And finally, delivering amazing assistive experiences. So whether that is through Uber, we talked about this morning or this afternoon about being that immediate thing you can go to, and you don't have to think about it. It'll get you where you want to be to where you want to get to without you have to think about the journey or how you're going to do it. So I think let's think about some of those ways that we can do that as brands as well. So the first one is it's all about data and machine learning, as I just mentioned. So we want to be thinking about how we can predict and think about what's next for our customers. So we've got tons of examples of how brands are really now starting to use their first-party data. They're going to run models on this. They're going to start to really understand who their audiences are and start to really customize and tailor the experiences. We talk a lot about storytelling in marketing. And I think now we're at a point where we've got so much information and so much data, it almost becomes too difficult. So sometimes you have to go back to basics, and I think one of the ladies mentioned that earlier, don't try and run before you can walk, but try and think about how you can start to simply look and segment your audiences and start to really tailor those messages. An example from Listerine here, where they did some storytelling, understood who their audiences were and customized the messages at different stages of the journey into different segments. And actually they found that for those videos that were customized, they had a 30% uplift in terms of view-through rate. So it really does make a difference when you can get the messaging right to the customer. And I know you can all see thousands of examples of this from your own brands and from all our partners out there that are doing this already. But I think one thing is understanding your audience, but the next thing is getting the messaging right. And I see so many times customers are like, I've got a data management platform, I've got all this data, but yet they're still sending the same message to all those audiences and expecting magic to happen. You have got to think about how you're going to tailor the content. And a lot of technology is making it easier now that you can make slight changes or slight tweaks to make a difference without having to produce 500 assets for each campaign. And then finally, this is on to Connect, which is all about thinking about how we're going to connect with them at each stage of their journey. So in the Google world, you'll notice that we do a lot of Google shopping, and we've talked about that as well, I think, today. And that's one way we're helping customers with sort of curating a lot of that content and helping that experience at that point. And this is what we think the future might look like in terms of when you search. So can you imagine that when you're searching for Nike, you had all this amazing content and not just what you've got at the moment, which is just a sea of text on a page? So this is what we're thinking about in terms of what we think the future might look like for curating that content when you're searching for a brand. If you search for something like a washing machine at the moment or a fridge freezer, it's a pretty dull experience, and we think that brands should be aiming for an experience like this, and Google should be helping to aid that as well. And another story about connecting the online and offline world, because it is about that full experience end to end. So Matalan did some work with us to help understand the value of digital and how that was impacting their in-store sales, because they were finding they were spending all this money on digital, but they weren't really seeing the benefit of it. As we talked about earlier, majority is still spent in store. So the work they did to be able to understand this, they actually found out that actually for every £1 they were spending on, say, mobile search ads, it was actually driving £46 in sales, which £31 of that were in store. So it really helped them to understand that journey. And because they've got all this data, they could then start to think, well, are they new or are they returning customers? What are the product sets that actually are driving customers in store? I think they found like school uniforms, for example, where you need it now, is one of the key areas, or luggage, which they found were really performing badly in online, but when they actually took into account offline sales, was actually doing really well. So it's thinking about trying to connect the story across all parts of your puzzle of the customer journey. And then finally, driving action. So this is all about how we get to remove that friction and make it a really seamless experience for our customers, whether that's in your stores, on your websites, on your apps. And really, how can you be that assistant? There's so many brands out there now that help curate their content, give you great filters, but there's so many doing it badly. Like Boots, for example. The other day I was looking at children's clothes. They still can't get the sizing right. There was like 5 different versions of age 1 to 2 because some had gaps in them, some didn't, some were the ampersand and some were the line. Like, it's really hard for brands to do this. We know it's difficult, but I think we need to think about how we're helping the consumer to make that digital journey really work for them. An example I'm going to show you, my last example today, is from RS Components. So not a brand you'd imagine to be at the top of the times in terms of digital and brands. They're a B2B brand. But actually, for them, it was really important. They have thousands and thousands of products. And they had 1.4 million pages that they had to get mobile ready. So this was done at a board level. They made a big decision to invest in this and to invest with the right developers, the right people, and the right partners, and actually resulted in them a 29% uplift in mobile conversions because they had the right technology in place and the right experience for their customers. So again, a great example of how they've taken a customer problem and they've really used technology to aid that and really help and improve their business at the same time as helping their customers. So I'll leave that there, and this is a quote from Benedict Evans, and I'm sure many of you watched his presentation from 2018, but it really comes back to the active story is reaching the end. So we talk about that curve of where we wanted to get to in terms of people having access to the internet. We're pretty much there, right? Everyone's got access to the internet, but it's saying the story is just the beginning in terms of how we're using it. And I think the next 15 years is going to be really exciting, seeing how machine learning is shaping that and data and technology are really changing these customer experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abigail. That's fascinating. There's some questions come in, so I've probably got time for about 2 or 3. And the first one is, please could you clarify the 80% slide?
So 80% of the adult population are shopping online, but still 80% of the transactions are still in store. So they're actually in store rather than online.
Got it.
Yeah.
We talk about personalization, but when does it cross the line to being creepy?
Yeah, a good point. That's something we have to talk to our clients a lot about. And I actually work in the tech side of our business, so definitely very much top of mind conversation. So, yes, I think where it gets creepy is where you're using too much personal information in that information. They shouldn't know that you've been on and looked at hay fever tablets and now you're retargeting them with hay fever. I mean, that becomes quite personal, particularly if it's a medical profession. I think it's about being relevant, but without crossing the line with the data. So you might know they've got a huge sporting interest, so you might make the content more relevant to people that are sports fans, a bit like the Listerine example earlier. But it doesn't mean that you have to go, "Hi Bob, I know you like sport, so here's something I found for you." So I think it's about getting the messaging right and being careful with how you use that data.
Yeah.
And again, don't just spam them with loads and loads of the same ad, of the same thing they've looked at, and make sure you're using your data. They might have bought it 2 days ago. And I think that's what gives digital ads a really bad name, is when we see this repetition. And it should be about the storytelling. And I think we'll come into the world more and more where we're thinking about it's the right content for that sort of cluster of audiences.
And we've been talking a long time about online to offline and vice versa, but what's the latest thinking about measuring from clicks to bricks or bricks to clicks?
Yeah, so that is the biggest question on everyone's lips at the moment, particularly for example, like CPG guys who really don't know all their digital advertising is driving in-store with retailers. So we're doing a lot of work, whether it's working with loyalty card programs or third-party providers like LiveRamp, who can try and do that matching. So they can take, maybe if you're a tech player, you probably people register your products, so you've got that email address. So you can try and connect using a third party, try and do that cookie matching in a safe space with a third party provider, and then bring that into the digital world to be able to target those customers.
Just final question, what percentage of retailers are doing that?
Doing it well.
Doing it well, yeah.
I don't know if I've got a percentage off the top of my head, but in terms of like thinking about those that are the most multi-moment sort of thinking, I'd say it's probably only about sort of 5% that have got to that point.
So there's a lot of progress to be made.
There's still a lot of way to go, but yeah, in a good space.
Very good. Thank you very much.
All right,
Really
thank you.
appreciate it.